to lead a discussion that will help you prep for the advisory board meeting next week, if I don't remember.
Got it. Okay, I'm just gonna say help us prep for the advisory board meeting next week. So shouldn't take the full, next 40 minutes of meeting, but it could. So we're having a community advisory group meeting next week. I'm gonna share RSVPs. So currently we have a few different folks that are going to be participating. I have 8 yeses, so 8 people should be a good group for a good discussion. These include Alicia, who you all may know from Colorado State. She's with the Built Environment Group. I forget what the name of that institute or center is from CSU. So she works with a lot of different communities on various energy related projects. We have organizations present like energyoutreach.org. So those are like environmental or energy advocacy based organizations. 2 people from there. Have the director or one of the directors of the state weatherization assistance program is planning to attend. So they should be able to provide some voices about the weatherization program on low income energy customers in the state. We had reached out to, there's a group that focuses on health. So it's like a large meeting from, I think, kind of health department folks or health folks in the area, and that may be thinking about indoor air quality. So we've got a couple of people from that aspect of community health. And then I invited some folks to be able to join from, there's an environmental justice program specifically through the Colorado Department of Environment and Public Health. And there's someone who focuses specifically on community outreach with that environmental justice group. So they're going to join as well. So I think that we've got a good mix so far, and I look forward to everybody's introductions during the meeting, learning more about them, their work, who they represent, who their kind of maybe constituents are or their members are of their organizations, and their high-level issues that they focus on in the state. So I want to spend some time going over what the agenda would be for the meeting. I'd really like to hear from you all. If you were to brainstorm and think about your top outcomes from this meeting, what would you like some of the top outcomes to be? After this meeting, you hope to have blank. What would that look like for you?
I can start. I think for me, it's less like, especially because this is the first meeting, I think for me, I would like these people to come back and engage with us again in the future. And so I want to make the time useful for them. Like, I think because it's the first meeting, I'm not like, oh, I have to get something out of this so much as like, if we can get a group of people involved in this space that we can bounce ideas off of in the future, that's really where I'd like to be. So I don't, yeah. I guess that's make them come back again. That's what I would like.
Maybe then to build on that, Ryan, I think another way to think about it after you said that is what would be of value to them such that they would come back or they would respond if we have questions outside of just this one meeting. Because I think what I'm hearing from you is a desire for more of a continuous conversation, maybe not super high frequency and duration, but the ability to keep a conversation going. And I think that that instinct resonates with me, because I don't think that one-time meeting, I would be able to think of all the things we might want to get out of it. Or, but if we learned what might keep them engaged, that seems like a good way to keep that conversation going.
Great. Anything else? Chris, maybe?
Yeah, for me, I think at least early on, I guess I would look at what we want from them to kind of occur in stages. I think what we're asking for develops over time, but I know for me, early on, their value will come from being able to provide feedback on the path we're taking. As far as the interviews go, early feedback is going to help. And then, of course, once we get underway, I could see this whole thing, just evolving over time, providing continuous feedback, and getting ideas about, for instance, if we're finding that something isn't necessarily leading to the information we want, perhaps that board can provide guidance to get there.
Right. Does anyone on the call have past experiences with working with like a community advisory board on a research study in the past, or maybe something similar or adjacent? Just curious.
I have more recent, or right now, on a NIH funded project that's trying to look at climate and health really broadly, and I serve on the academic advisory board. There's a community advisory board, and then there's a policy advisory board. So I think my exposure to this has been that when it actually is, when it's referred to as a community board, those members are members of the communities that are part of that project. Those are communities in different parts of Colorado, so that they're residents. And then the policy people are in government or in positions where they make decisions, like one's a city council member, one's I think a CDPHE member, somebody might be a senator at the state level in Colorado. And then the academic board is either research organizations or universities. I'm trying to think of what might be relevant to share. Something that they did for us as board members was make us answer a survey before we started, which I'll say I was resentful of because it was too long and it was given the day before. However, it did ask questions that helped the conversation be better. So I think it was the right ideas. It was just poorly timed from my one single perspective. But it was like a little Qualtrics survey. Actually, it wasn't so little, that was the problem. They said, this will be just 5 minutes, but it was really like 20 open-ended questions. But I thought it was, so why it was useful is that it helped all of us, there were like 12 of us, talk about what our identity was with respect to the unifying themes, and actually revealed a lot of variability in the perspectives that people were bringing to the conversation. So that's the experience I've had. I've disbanded.
I'm curious if there were any questions in that Qualtrics survey that you were really drawn to, Ellison, or if you could just like, if you could still find that survey, I don't know. It would be really interesting to see that and to see if there are any question prompts that could come up either in the meeting on the 28th,
Mhm.
kind of like very lightly, or sometime in the future. And I don't feel bad stealing other people's questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you have it, not a big deal. That's great. Nursma, I saw that you put some stuff in the chat. You're part of a project right now in New York where there's an environmental justice association guiding the research design and scenarios. Would you like to say a little bit about that and how it's going?
Yeah, I mean, I was brought into this project that is run by the Resources for the Future. And they've been contracted specifically to do modeling scenarios to look at the impacts of the energy transition in New York State on the air pollution and on disadvantaged communities. So the NEJA has been very instrumental in guiding this research. So it's like, maybe it's different setup because they are the clients, so to speak, and they've literally, whatever inputs they've wanted in the scenarios, we just take on board. And not like an advisory group, but they're literally guiding the research because they all virtually commissioned the work.
Okay.
But it's just an example of high stakeholder involvement with environmental justice as the main motivation. And it was interesting as to what they wanted to put in there that the New York State hasn't put into their own decarbonization scenarios. So I guess relevance for this project, if you wanted contacts, and I would have a list of contacts I can draw on. If you were curious about the types of inputs they gave, so that you may think about what types of input stakeholders here may be interested in. If it's EJ oriented, I know we're looking broader than just EJ, of course.
Right.
And in terms of process, it's a little different. But there has been a kind of a process where, they would provide certain inputs, then we'd have broad meetings and we'd present the results, they'd give feedback, and then it would be iterative in that sense. But maybe it's easier if you had specific questions that I can answer about it.
All right. I'll think about it. I don't have any specific questions at this time. If anyone on the call has questions, they could ask them. I think in some ways it's interesting that NERSMA is like, it's specifically environmental justice focused. So like, it almost sounds like at the start of the project, like there is this expected outcome, which is that like your research is going to lead to understanding how to run more effective, understand the impacts and run more effective programs when it comes to like environmental justice in New York, making sure that there are equitable practices and that people who are typically left out and left behind are not in these processes. This is a conversation that happens a lot with a lot of different groups in Illinois. And I have not personally like interviewed the like 8 different people that might be coming to this meeting for the Colorado side. I'm interested and look forward to learning more from them, how the conversation has evolved and is evolving around the topic of environmental justice in Colorado. Who's involved, who isn't, who is at that table. It's not clear or obvious to me right now, and I haven't been, delving deeply into that yet. But I think it's an important aspect of this project. Chris, you've had environmental related research projects with community citizen formed groups. I'd like to hear about that a little bit. Sorry, Ryan, I'm skipping over you because it was research and exactly what you put in the chat here. Chris, I'd like to hear more.
Yeah, I have worked in various contaminated community settings, communities where they're facing or experiencing a particular type of contamination, usually soil or water. And in every single one of those communities, there's been a citizen formed group that has been typically, very instrumental in my own project, because not only are they the ones that are, more actively involved, and they do tend to have some shared goals in terms of what they are expecting in terms of outcomes, but in my experience, they've also been really helpful to me in understanding more deeply what some of the overall concerns are, and they've helped, for the most part, shape the interviews that I do with residents who, for various reasons, aren't as involved.
So I'm hearing in that experience that the citizens group, they're sort of at the center and experiencing like a shared problem of pollution or community pollution in some way. And then they've been involved in both shaping the research, helping the research questions, and also part of like the solutions in their community a little bit. So they're at the center of it and they're experiencing stuff.
Yeah, I think, I would say that in most of those settings in which I have started a project, I've more or less relied on some kind of local media coverage for my understanding of the issues that nearby community is facing. And so one of the first things that I've done in the past is I've looked for a community-led or citizen-led group to better understand, their more specific experiences, because obviously any kind of media coverage is going to be rather limited, and perhaps even depending on the community setting, could be leaning a particular way toward concern or non-concern. So yeah, those citizens have been very informative in terms of understanding, sometimes, for instance, company dynamics behind the contamination, and health concerns, and all different types of issues that all vary depending on the community context.
Mhm.
Based on the feedback that I've gotten just now from this group, and thinking about the community advisory group in different ways. First, I'm just going to say that like the group of people that we have attending this week, they feel like policy people. It's going to feel like a policy advisory group, I think, just on the nature of who's coming. And then I think what we can do with that is continue to think about ways to like leverage these policy people for making contacts with community members. So if there is like this acknowledgement that we're not really wanting to make this a policy board or, and influence the, specifically just on policy, but we wanted it to be more from the like grassroots and talk to community members. I'll just acknowledge that we really haven't gotten to them yet by reaching out to the organizations that we reached out to. There's like a wall between people who are like representative of large groups of people and who their constituents are. At this point, it would be, I think, really difficult without having met our team and more familiarity with the project to say to anybody on this call, like coming up, all right, we wanted you to participate, but we also were actually really interested in your constituents. We want to have this more grassroots voice. We want almost this like citizens board for this project. And maybe it evolves there into something like that in the future. Or maybe we have both. Tammy and I'm sure we'll talk about it and kind of figure it out. But I'm laying out that I think the reality is that I'm thinking about, okay, who's coming? There are going to be some like policy type people in this meeting. And I think that they'll have really good feedback. I want to make sure that we're asking them the right questions. So for this meeting, we have an hour. And to be honest, a bunch of it is going to be covered by welcomes and introductions and what this project is specifically, and sort of building a shared understanding of the Respect Project. We want to learn from each other. We want to learn who's coming, who's in the room, who's showing up, what their motivations are, and things like that. And I'll send out an agenda after this meeting today with some of like the question prompts that we'll use in the introduction. One of the things that I would like to then find out for the agenda is like, who would like to give the background and the intro to the project, what it is overall. And then we're going to get a little bit more focused on the aspect of the research that we're talking about with this group during that meeting. Ryan, I see that you just put some stuff there too.
Oh, I was just typing away in the chat about potential things I'd be curious about. So
I think that's a good question. Is the nature of residential energy transition like this abstract kind of concept that doesn't feel very grassroots?
Is Tammy not going to be there? I think she might have said that.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
If Tammy is not there for giving the overall background to the whole project, I think I would assign it to her, but if she can't be there, who would like to do that?
Probably can't represent it like she would, but I'm
Okay.
fine swinging the bat. Swinging. Ryan, I don't know, or Chris, if either one of you would be more comfortable. I'm not trying to do it.
I can't actually make this one. So I
Oh,
would
okay.
volunteer, like if it'd be really helpful, I could make like a summary video of some sort. But then yeah, sorry. I thought I was gonna be able to make it, but yeah, it's not gonna happen.
Okay, so is videoing videoing the meeting overall might be useful. I was hesitant to be like, oh, we're gonna video this because it's a bunch of people we haven't really met before, but if we get their consent, is that helpful to the team?
I would
Rather than
totally
just
watch it
playing?
afterwards. I would love to, because I was sad I couldn't make it. And so like, I think that's the thing that like, if they let us record, I would love that. And I will happily watch it. Yeah, we're just going to be on our way on the road. And I don't think I'm going to have internet service. And yeah.
Okay. There's two aspects of the work right now that I think the group is asking feedback on. One is the outreach strategy for the interviews, and the other one is the interviews themselves. two-part question. Should we try and get to both? If only one of those is, for time reasons, gotten to, is there an aspect that you want to focus on more than the other?
My initial thought is that if there are 10 people in the room and introductions are not well, or are not efficient, then I don't think getting to a second topic is, I wouldn't advise for it. I can't say for sure, but I think it would end up feeling like the two topics get shortchanged. Yeah, I think I agree with Brian's. Chris's interviews would be a priority. That's something you agree with, Chris.
Yeah, and I do fully plan on being there, so I can talk more effectively about the interviews themselves and the types of questions that we're seeking to ask, and receiving any feedback they might have. As far as the selection strategy goes, I might be a little bit more uncomfortable trying to talk about that because at this stage I'm sort of at least early on, Ryan will be kind of feeding me contact information for people. So as far as talking about the more of the methods involved in that selection, I would not be the most effective person to talk to. So I would say if we talk more about the interviews themselves and the content of those interviews, that might be the best use of our time.
Okay, and Ryan also said that he could do like a 3-minute lightning talk for selection. If people are curious, we could have it ready to go. We may be able to do that and say, like, send us feedback for what your thoughts are on this outreach strategy after the meeting, as a follow-up, if they want to comment on that. It's possible.
Might be a bit of contrarian on this front.
Yeah.
I think there are people that would maybe respond with thoughts, but I think as much as we can get out of the time that we're with them, the better. I think I bring to the table this assumption that even though there's some compensation, it's effectively pro bono work that's added on top of probably an already full plate.
Mm-hmm.
The likelihood that they respond to hey, we did this other thing that you have to go look at and then think about in isolation and then give us feedback, that's a vague request, I think will either yield something of low value or nothing. I do like the idea of a short video and a really focused list of maybe 2 questions of like, what groups are missing? And what dimensions of variability are we neglecting or overemphasizing or something like that, Ryan? I don't know what you think of that, but if we had very focused questions that we could get them to answer while they're in the room, that I think would be a strategy I'd like to pursue.
It's an hour, right?
Yeah.
I think that's where, like, to me, like, I think we have to pick either selection or the interviews themselves. So I think the interviews are going to take an hour. And I thought about the lightning talk more as we're not going to get feedback, but like, let's say we're discussing this and people get hung up on selection. It's like, well, let's take 3 minutes and this is how we're going to select people so that we can move back to interviews.
Yeah.
That was how I had thought about it. But,
oh, I like that. Okay. I see what you're saying.
because I agree that I just don't think we can do all of this in an hour meeting, and I want to use the time as well as we can. And like, we spent an hour as our group talking about selection and an hour talking about the questions, and these people won't have seen the project at all. So
Yeah. No, I like that idea a lot. If you feel like you can make that video and then the question is very likely to come up. And it's a nice break in terms of anyone that's done teaching. It's nice to be like, hey, watch this video. It's like a fun little mode switch.
I
Chris,
like that. I like the incorporation of it, like on a as needed basis. If that comes up, and it may. Chris, I haven't had a chance to look at the email that you sent me earlier. You sent me,
Yeah, no problem. It was just Tammy had mentioned in the agenda to send you any materials that could potentially be useful. I can't remember the exact way it was worded, but I just sent the recruitment informational sheet that we'll be using. So if when Ryan gives me contact information, that would be essentially the email I send out would have that language trying to recruit them. And if I'm trying to get a hold of them by phone, that's essentially what I would be the script I would be reading from to try to get them to agree to participate in an interview.
are there any other materials that you would like to have shared out in advance?
That's up to you. If you want the more current draft of the interview guide itself, I can send that too.
Yeah, what if you sent me the draft interview guide with like 2 or 3 questions that you want people to respond to?
Sure. Okay.
No promises
do that
that
today.
anyone actually, looked at it in advance, but
Sure.
if you can do those 3 questions, then that would be probably the direction of the conversation that we go in for that meeting. So we can work together on that.
Okay.
For that section, so you'll be presenting that section. Okay, we'll have some like housekeeping items. People need to fill out like a form because of the gift card, so they'll have to give their information. We're probably just gonna do something like put the form in the chat. If people want a gift card, they'll go to that form, and after the meeting, as a reminder, I'll send out an email. Thank you for coming. If to receive a gift card, please fill out this form. And then one other aspect that we might be interested in is how does this group want to stay in touch about this project? What information do they want to receive? And how frequently? That's really open-ended, so I'll try and figure it out. I think that we're trying to jam a lot into 1 hour, and also knowing that it's going to be fairly infrequent. Maybe my next question is actually like a follow-up from this team on this call is what's next? Like, we're going to talk about this subject this time. Is there a follow-up topic that in a few months or 4 months or something, if we bring this group back together, that we can say, thank you for coming this time. We're really excited for your participation. We have so much to learn from each other. We are really glad that you're here. Our next communication will be about X. What would that be? What do you think it might look like?
What's the timeline for that?
Pretty open-ended right now. We were like thinking originally we were going to have this board. It was going to be selected people. They were going to be like the board. They would be named. And then we got 4 people to respond, and we thought that's a really weak response. So we've pivoted a bit and opened this up to be more of like a series of advisory meetings that might be more open-ended, and we can use a snowball method to find out, is there anyone else that should be part of these conversations? And also, if they have trusted community members who are doing like grassroots work in the communities, would they recommend other people to join this to get to that? So move it down from high-level directors of weatherization to either people who are doing weatherization work or having received weatherization on their homes, or from like an not Energy Out West, but like energy outreach organization, not the executive director of that organization, but like a volunteer in their organization who cares deeply about these issues, to kind of move it from that very high level participation of people who are like thinking about this stuff every single day to groups that are thinking about it, but from a different angle. So timeline, sorry, original question. It's a little bit freeform. I think it would be too much work on my part and this team's part if we were like, we're going to do this monthly or even bi-monthly. Like there's a lot that goes into this. It's going to feel overwhelming. So maybe quarterly.
I mean, maybe then if it's quarterly, the easiest thing I think would be we are going to have like preliminary results to discuss with people, or like a first
I was
cut of
thinking
results.
that. Yeah, I had the same thought, Brian, that whatever the outputs are at that point, and I was thinking like 3 to 4 months from now, that those would be presented and with interpretation to the extent that it's possible, like high fidelity presentation
Mhm.
and key questions already articulated for what kind of feedback we are looking for. And then if the conversation goes in a different direction than those, that's fine. But I think not just like, and what do you think? But that we would have put in the time and thought into interpreting what we've found to that point, even if it's modest in 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, it's just some sort of validation from whatever results we're finding. So yeah, if we could get to that, and as Alison suggested, in whatever way.
Thanks. Yeah. Do you mean when you say validation, do you mean it like a gut check that this is like the
Yeah,
information?
so for
Yeah,
example,
okay.
if we found that, I don't know, age of the building is what defines everything. Be like, hey, we found this. What do you think?
Yeah, you could almost ask questions like, does this surprise you? If so, why? Does this seem boring to you? Does it confirm everything you already know? Maybe don't frame it that way. Bad job on my part. Stacy, I wanted to say two things related to like managing the board, just from my own perspective, which is limited, but I think if you can ask or send it an email that helps people anticipate an amount of time that they might spend on a pre-survey, if that's something you want to do, I think it's a really useful tool. And then it allows you, what they did for us is they said, okay, and when we're done, we're going to send you a follow-up email that has a post like survey. And so they got more information out of me than they would have otherwise because of both the pre and the post survey. And what I'm suggesting, one thing I think they did really wrong is estimate the amount of time. They said it would be less than 5 minutes and it was solidly 20 minutes, but I would have been fine with that. I was just irritated.
They were just told you like, this is going to take you 20 minutes to fill it out.
Yeah, if they had, then that's fine. Like I think I just was a little more rushed because I was like, are you serious? This question alone would take me 20 minutes. But I do think that that tool was really useful because they got the results and then they had figures to show like, this is what people said in response to this. This is the distribution, because it was in Qualtrics. You can just pull the figures right off. You don't have to do, I think, hardly any work. And I think that was actually really instructive because I didn't know, I was surprised by some of the things that I saw.
I don't feel like with 1 week before the meeting that I've got the capacity to pull it off.
Yes, sure. No, that's understandable.
But I don't think that I'm saying it's completely off the table. I don't think it's wrong to say in preparation for the next meeting, please fill out, you know, the survey. We're figuring things out as we go along a little bit in terms of what our.
Do you feel like
asks
it's a
are.
bandwidth issue for you or for the board people?
I feel like it's a bandwidth issue for me at this point.
If I threw together a Google form by like Monday,
We could see what people say.
yeah, and if
I
it
do
didn't
need to
work, we
send them
just
a reminder
pushed
email.
it out to the next meeting. Like if it's a no-go, that's no wasted effort.
Yeah, if that's.
Brian, you're smirking. Why are you
I don't know. What do y'all
smirking?
think?
I'm sending a message to Kartik. It wasn't anything to do with.
Oh, okay. I was like, maybe you're like, no, that's a terrible idea. If it is, I don't necessarily need to do it, but I think,
That might help the getting to know you kind of stuff.
yes, it made it a lot faster and we used our time
Okay.
better. And as a person on the board side of things, I've been in other meetings where I'm like, I can't believe that this is how they're using their 1 hour. We
Okay.
spent like 30% of the time.
Introducing
people's
one another,
titles.
which I
Yeah,
think is
which would,
exactly what's
you know,
gonna happen, right?
Right.
Okay,
So I think it doesn't even have to be that in depth, like it can be just some simple questions that if it's in Google Forms, I could make some quick figures and put them on some slides. And if we hate them at the last minute, we can just ditch it and say.
yeah.
"No, good."
If you feel like you've got the bandwidth for that, amazing, I would say yes,
Yeah.
because I'll be crafting an email to go out
Monday,
Monday or Tuesday. Monday,
Okay.
probably. That's just a reminder that says, hey, you signed up for this meeting. Here's the Zoom info again.
yeah,
It would be very helpful then. Please fill out this 15-minute survey if it's 15
Yeah.
minutes, or 8-minute survey if it's 8.
Yeah.
So that we can, and maybe people would actually, I think I appreciate stuff like this, and I think you do too, and other folks would, if we say like, this is going to really help us speed through introductions so we can get to the meat of what we would like this conversation to be focused on. I think people would appreciate that.
okay,
Okay. So I'll be working on that reminder email to go out, and we could include that link. I can't, we might not get everybody, but that'll be helpful. If it's helpful to this group. It sounds like it would be.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we're pretty much, I think, out of time for our meeting. Does anyone else have anything that they want to bring up when it comes to planning or planning ideas? All right, I'm gonna move forward then with creating the agenda. I'm gonna send that out to the GCR team. Feedback is welcome on the agenda that ends up getting created. Chris, you'll send me some extra documents and some questions, so we'll sort of build that in. And then I look forward to a nice meeting next week. And maybe we can debrief it on Friday in the Friday call.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like a good idea. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.